Hey, welcome to the Lovecraft Easing podcast. I'm Mike Davis, and our guest today is Premee Mohamed. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Um, you're the author of the Beneath the Rising series, and you have a new collection, No One Will Come Back for Us. There it is. Hang on a second. Do that again, and I'm gonna. Yeah, there you go. Oh, I need to. What? I hit the wrong button. I don't know what I'm doing. Remove pen. There we go. So yeah, thanks for being here. We're gonna do introductions real quick. We just do very brief introductions for anyone who does not know us or is listening later, because I'll have this on Spotify and Apple and other podcast apps tomorrow, Premee. So I'll send you that link when it's up. So some people watch it and a lot of people listen to it too, because they can listen on the go and so forth. Anyway, I'm Mike Davis with Lovecraft Easing. Let's start with Ben. Good to see you, Ben.
I'm Ben Handelman, supporter and tormentor of Mike Davis.
It's very true.
Glad to be here.
Extremely true. Matt.
Hi, I'm Matt Carpenter. I am currently running Lovecraft Easing Movie Night. For the last 3 weeks, we've watched The Droving, Renfield, and Fallen. So tune in if you want. The prize for this week is I've got some graphic novels. This one is called Real Hero Shit by Kendra Wells. And it is, I think if you like D&D, you would like this book. At any rate, you can enter to win by sending an email to easingprizes@gmail.com and put RHS in the subject heading. We draw a winner in about 6 weeks, and who knows, it might be you.
If you're interested in doing movie night, just go to the Lovecraft Easing website, and it'll be on there. It's one of the events. Click on community and events. I think that's what it is, and you can join the chat, the Facebook chat that allows you to, Matt to communicate with you, and the link to watch and everything with them on Saturday nights. So, Tanya.
Hi, I'm Tanya Ransom, the creator and executive producer of Nightlight and Afflicted podcasts, and I'm here because I really like Mike and I like this show.
Thanks.
For now, apparently,
For now.
we'll see.
She said it out loud and in public. It's not retractable.
That's right. She did add for now, though.
For now, yeah.
You never
gotta
know.
have that legal disclaimer, at the end, because if Ben starts to torment me, maybe my mind will change. I don't know.
And remind me in the second hour to talk about your current crowdfunding venture for a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Rick.
Rick Lay, writer and pulp magazine collector.
Good to see you too. You had to miss last week. So, and Pete.
What do you want? I give you so much, and you just take and take and take.
Well, when are you going to learn?
I don't know. I've been married 5 times. You'd think I would, whatever.
Yeah. So you write books and stuff.
Yeah, I write books and review books, and I'm trying to write a Randolph Carter short story right now. And I've started it 3 times, and I just keep not hitting the right tone.
You'll get there. You always do.
I will.
Yeah.
But not writing the same way about Randolph Carter never stopped HPL. So.
Yeah, well, you're right.
So, do me a favor, everyone who's listening and or watching, even if you don't listen on Apple, it really helps if you go and leave a review, especially if it's an honest 5-star review. That really, really helps. Yeah, old joke, dad joke. And if you watch on YouTube, commenting and liking helps out a lot too. And of course, following the channel. Just go to YouTube and type in Lovecraft Easing podcast. And so here's a question for today. You guys can put it in the show, or in the show comments I'm talking to the audience. What's the strangest thing that's happened to you that's that really happened. Strange but true stories. So tell us about that. And
What's the rating on this?
whatever. No
No.
stories. No.
Hard
Yeah,
R, light R, PG-13.
you had to go there.
Huh.
Got a few new Patreons. I'm going to start shouting out to new Patreons and others that have been with me for a long time. Let's see, Max, Mark. Wow, another Max. And Aaron, thank you guys. So, Premee, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I can try. Yeah, I'm a scientist and a writer. I'm based out of Edmonton, Alberta. For those keeping track of the news or just sniffing the air, we are the source of the smoke that is currently blanketing the North American continent. Practically the whole place is on fire, except for the big cities, which luckily I am in. Yeah, I'm the author of the Beneath the Rising trilogy, which at some point I think my editor started calling the Void trilogy, as well as a couple of novellas, and most recently, as Mike mentioned, my debut short story collection, No One Will Come Back for Us, which is just out now from Undertow Publications.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. I just want to ask a quick question. Well, first of all, No One Will Come Back for Us came out this past Tuesday, so it's fresh out.
Yeah.
That was your book birthday last Tuesday. So
Actually,
congratulations for that.
Thank you.
And you're with Michael Kelly and Undertow, right?
Yeah, for this book, yeah.
How did that begin? And then I know Pete has a lot of questions for you as well.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not feeling the greatest, so he's going to help me. But you know, I think Michael Kelly contacted you. Is that right? About
Yeah.
doing a collection?
Yeah, he emailed me and my
Yeah.
agent and was like, I think the email wording literally said something like, "Hey, can I have a short story collection from you?" And I was like, I don't know, I don't have one. And then I emailed my agent and I was like, "Hey, what's up? What does this guy want?" And then he reminded me that Michael Kelly was with Undertow Publications and is the editor who did my agent sibling Cassandra Caw's collection, Breakable Things.
Yeah, we had her on just a couple weeks ago. She's
yeah,
great.
yeah, they're great. And the collection, Cass's collection, I think is up for like multiple awards possibly this year, definitely more than one. And yeah, so I kind of, after I chatted with my agent, we got back to Michael Kelly. Sorry, my agent's name is Michael Curry. So there's a lot of, in my inbox, it's like Michael Curry, Michael Kelly, Michael Curry, Michael Kelly. I have to like read an email very, very carefully before I respond.
Real quick, I should apologize. I believe Cassandra's pronoun is they, them. So
yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
not she. But yeah, Undertow's a great press. It really
Oh
is.
yeah. And actually they also did Steve Toz's collection, To Drown in Dark Water, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, which is also really good. But yeah, so Michael Kelly's brief was kind of, he got back to us after we accepted and was like, I would like you to send me, if possible, dark fantasy, horror, and sci-fi is okay if there's horror elements, but no like overt sci-fi, nothing, sort of deliberately whimsical or lighthearted,
Right.
or nothing with like an unambiguously super happy ending. It's like I want kind of an unsettling collection. I want it to be focused on horror and dark elements. And I was like, I think I can come up with that. So I sent him, I kind of ran through my stuff. I ended up sending him 18 stories just in chronological order of publication, because that's how I ended up listing them on my website. And he ended up removing one because it kind of didn't fit with the tone of the collection, and keeping the other 17. And then the order was Michael's idea as well. So that's kind of how that was curated.
Well, to the audience, please do pick up No One Will Come Back for Us. I'll have the link in the show notes. And I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's only $4.99 or so on Kindle. Is that right?
I'm not sure.
I think so.
It's not very much on Kindle for sure.
Yeah. And so pick that up, but also Google Undertow Publications, because Michael is really good. Michael Kelly is really good at what he does, and he's got a lot of great books that he's published. So anyway, I'm going to turn you over to Pete for a little bit, but I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate
I'm
the
a
invite.
little
Thank you.
under the weather, so
Yeah.
half I say is probably not making sense today.
So,
Pete.
yeah. So, I finished this at like 4 a.m. this morning.
Oh.
I'm going to disagree with Mike. I'm not going to tell everybody to go out and get it. I'm going to tell everybody to run out and get it.
Oh, thank you, Pete.
I've read a few of your stories before, in She Walks in Darkness, and what's the other? There's the other Lovecraftian anthology I can't think of the name of right now. But I'm gonna find it. A Breath from the Sky, Scott Jones. So I was familiar with some of your work. There's a whole bunch of linked stories in here.
Yeah, there's definitely stories in the same universe, I think, which I didn't realize until we were putting it together. But I think only 2 of the stories are actually linked.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But yeah, by the end, by 4 o'clock this morning, I was thinking it's the gods of the hills in green.
Yeah, or the
You know,
gods of the salt and the blue.
Yeah,
Or the gods of the whatever the horrible gods are in the honeymakers with the bees.
right. Which I wasn't sure was linked, but
I think it's all the same world. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's a world where
I'm not
gods.
surprised that Pete asked this question because he loves this kind of thing where
Yeah.
fiction is linked together.
I think what the goal was, I don't think I realized actually until I had written a couple of stories that I was writing not just the same, like not just putting in the same elements of like visible gods, sort of vague worship of gods being visible and having to leave out offerings, etc. until like the 3rd or 4th story that I wrote like that. And then I was like, oh, this keeps happening. Well, I'm just going to declare them all shared universe. That's what they are.
There's
Shared
a
universe.
there's a nice little bit in Below the Kirk, below the hill, where you're putting is the milk that they put out for the kitties, and the narrator's response is, no, that's for the
that's for the gods.
Don't they do that where you come from?
Yeah.
And it's kind of vague, but it's by the end of the collection you realize that it's part of the same world.
Yeah.
But it's just that one little bit. And then that world is also vaguely Lovecraftian.
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry, not even vaguely Lovecraftian. Miskatonic University is right there. It's
practically, yeah.
Overtly Lovecraftian.
It's overtly Lovecraftian, but it's in my mind, it's sort of like a mix with a stronger manly Wade Wellman world, or maybe a more of a Arthur Machen world.
I love Arthur Machen. I didn't read The Great God Pan until a couple years ago, and I was like, I have to go take a week off work and just lie down. Like, it blew my mind. I loved it so much.
I mean, essentially, there's a lot of little people and small native gods.
Yeah.
Throughout your world.
Yeah.
And then
wait till you guys read the novella that's coming out from Tor.com, The Butcher of the Forest, in 2024. That's heavily Arthur Machen. That's Arthur's like walking around touching everything in the novella.
But then on top of this, there's a sort of like slow invasion of Lovecraftian monsters that Miskatonic University and the corporation are working against, and it's an interesting take. Where did you decide? Yeah,
I don't know, this keeps coming up when people talk about writing modern cosmic horror. I'm actually teaching a workshop for Neon Hemlock in a couple of weeks about modern cosmic horror and kind of the roots of it, kind of what the history of those older stories is, and how people are updating the concepts and subverting some of the tropes now. But the biggest one that I wanted to push back against was a lot of those older stories, Lovecraft and Mackin and like Robert E. Howard even, stuff like that was, you've got stories that feel sort of narratively unfinished because there's no way for the human characters to do anything about what's happening in the story. Like, you get to the end and it's like, well, we saw the eldritch horror and then we went mad. And then I was like, what did you do next? Oh, the story's over. Okay, so you just went mad. Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I'll send you some cookies in the asylum or whatever.
Sorry for your bad luck. Like, just send him a shirt that says that.
Yeah, I'll send you a get well card. Maybe you won't get well, but it's you know what I mean. I'm sorry about your eldritch madness.
Yeah. Okay, we all need t-shirts. Clearly, we all
Yeah,
need
like a
t-shirts.
And
lot of
Hallmark
the-
cards.
Yes.
One of the stories felt, oh my god, we should start this. I
The
would totally
Eldritch
wear
Horror
like
collection.
a get well from your eldritch madness t-shirt. I would wear that everywhere.
I heard that you were sick with
Yeah.
Eldritch Madness.
With eldritch madness.
Now I'm picturing
you people are asking a lot of questions that are answered by my shirt.
now I'm picturing Ferris Bueller instead of
Yeah.
faking being sick. Oh, Mom, Dad, I've got Eldritch Madness
I
today.
saw a thing. I saw an inexplicable, indescribable thing. I can't go to school today.
Right. They bought it.
Back in my day, we had to walk uphill both ways in the snow and dodge an Eldritch Horror.
Exactly. Like, there were Shoggoths in every ditch, and I still had to be there at 7 a.m.
Okay, Danforth.
But yeah, like those stories, they kind of felt narratively unsatisfying to me. And a lot of particularly horror writers back then, a lot of those stories do feel narratively unsatisfying to modern readers because they
Right.
weren't focused on characters, or like a lot of the characters in a lot of the stories are completely interchangeable. They have no personalities. They're just basically like a flat character every time that is just meant to express an idea. And the idea is that humanity as a whole is screwed if these beings ever get, ever notice us. If we ever get to attract their attention, we don't want their attention. That's bad. And the people that are summoning these things are idiots, and they should not be doing that.
It's wrong.
So-
I gotta come on
Yeah,
down
I
on
think
the
we
side
can-
of it's
I
wrong.
think we can take a moral stance on this one and say, don't summon those things.
They
What bad
keep digging things up. Like,
And
was it the
touching
priestess,
things.
the extra tall priestess with the golden eye? It's like, leave
Put
her
it back.
alone. Like,
It's
what
not
are
one
y'all
of those.
doing?
It's not one of those gray areas in life, people.
I
Oh,
know.
and like these stone tablets they found at like the bottom of the sea.
Oh,
Like, please leave
taking that
those
home.
there.
I'm putting that on top of my fireplace. No, don't do that. What is wrong with you? But yeah,
You're going to die.
You're gonna die. You're gonna kill everybody in the world, and you're gonna die, and all for an Instagram photo. Shame on you. But
Have you
Freaking influencers.
have you
Freaking Eldritch
seen the our Kelly, what's his last name?
Young.
Kelly Young. He's a filmmaker. He has a very short film called The Package.
Oh
It's
God,
it's
it's
about
brilliant.
this it's about this guy in the library who's like, oh, there's a package for you, and he opens up and it's a Lovecraftian manuscript, and he's like, I urge you to destroy this immediately. The fate of the world rests in your hands. It was 6 years ago, and then the whole thing ends as he throws the manuscript into the fire.
Oh,
He
it's
does
just
the
like,
opposite of
finally,
every
someone with some
Lovecraftian.
common sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He does the he does the opposite of every Lovecraftian protagonist.
Yeah,
Who
yeah.
they ignore the advice. And when
They're
you
like-
watch the short film, it is
Yeah.
so funny and so unexpected that
Yeah, that would be the last thing I would expect. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, well, if this was a proper like horror protagonist, they would immediately go to the university and start finding out more information about it. And then
Right.
being like, I wonder if I can learn this ancient language and then recite the spell on the first page. And you're like, you not
Nothing
have any
bad's
home
gonna
training?
happen with an ancient spell. Nothing bad has ever
Yeah.
happened with an ancient spell.
Didn't you people watch Evil Dead?
Right? Or like
No.
Supernatural. Like,
Anything? Any horror movie ever?
Right.
I don't know.
Buffy once more with feeling,
or hell,
Yeah.
even the Brandon Fraser, The Mummy. I'm picturing that older guy going,
Yeah.
no, no, do not read aloud from the book.
Yeah.
Actually,
like
that
good
would be
timing.
that would be a great thing. It's like, so congratulations, you've graduated from our university. We're gonna send you on trips to dig up things, but the first thing we have to do is cut your tongue out.
Yeah. Or
Oh
something.
gosh, but you know what? They're reminding me of a story from the 2000 anthology Dead But Dreaming, which was a really great anthology. It was called The Disciple,
Brilliant.
where this person goes to Miskatonic University and he's looking for eldritch dark power. That's what he wants. And he has to go through the professor, and the professor makes him do something that was really kind of horrific to get in the class. And then when he gets in the class, I'm sorry if I'm going to spoil this. It's like the professor isn't really teaching them anything, it turns out. He's just urging them how to reach out to these dark powers so they can bind them to they can become their patron. And there's this traveler from the stars, and astronomically, it swings into position like once a year. I don't know, maybe it's like All Hallows Eve or something like that. And so he takes his whole class out there and says, now reach up to this thing. And there's this tremendous, huge, dark thing just in the sky. And the students with real power are reaching out to it, and they're getting bound to it. And then our protagonist looks over at the professor, and the professor's hiding and covering his eyes. And it turns out that his job at the university was to make all the people who want dark power bind themselves to this thing, and they're swept off the earth.
Forgot about that story.
Yeah,
That's a
so-
pretty
social
dope
immunity.
job, though.
I love
like-
It's a really well-written story.
Yeah, I want to find that now. Actually, I have a story coming up in, actually, it might be out now, an anthology called What Draws Us Near, which is published by Little Ghost Book. And it was meant to be about forbidden texts, so I kind of had them on the mind anyway. And my story is called Litany of the Book Compounded, where a young man, after his aunt dies, receives a book that contains literally very strict instructions to not do anything with it, just keep it safe and, you know, don't destroy it or whatever. And so, of course, he opens it up and finds that it's an unfinished book that people have been working on for centuries and adding to this book. And he's like, well, I have to finish it now, of course, because he's in a horror story. So the story's about that.
I don't want to stray too far away from you, Premee, because you're the star of the show today. But this also reminds me of Joe's recent book anthology, The Leaves of the Necronomicon.
Necronomicon.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to drag us back to Premee.
Let's do that. Yeah.
What? Why?
Premee,
Drag us back to the Eldritch Horror.
well, because you played with this trope of the, you know, exploring and then going mad, or having the story not finished in The Adventurer's Wife.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which was my very first story sale, actually.
okay.
Yeah, and yeah, looking back, I'm like, this is such a pastiche. It's got the Lovecraft voice. People complimented me on that afterwards. I'm like, yeah, but that's not my voice. That's
Right.
clearly his voice. But still, I like how it turned out. Like, I like oh, well, you did take the sacred artifact. Now look what happens.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, a lot of going mad in that one.
So, all right. The title story for the collection, is that linked to The Dark Rising or Beneath the
A
Rising?
little bit, yeah.
Okay.
And I think I talked about that a bit in the story notes, because of the timing, right? So when Beneath the Rising, my debut novel, went out on sub, that was 2017. And and also everyone's telling me, well, don't expect your first novel on sub to sell. And even if it does sell, don't expect it to sell immediately. Just keep your expectations really, really low. And I was like, I can do that. But in the meantime, when I didn't know whether or not it was going to sell, I didn't mind putting references to the ending into other stories, because I was like, well, if the novel never gets sold and gets published and nobody ever reads it, these references are okay to stand on their own. Like in the story, they're described and explained by the characters in a way that's just vague enough for it to be something like, us describing a news event that happened in our town or something. So you don't need to have read the novel to understand the references in the stories,
Right.
or at least that's what I hope.
I
No,
love
it worked
things
out
like
really,
that
really
too. Yeah, I love things like that too. I was just going to briefly say, Laird and John do that all the time with their writings. Laird Barron and John Langan, you know, they refer to the Black Guide and various things. So
No, there's actually, so Mike is a big fan of quiet horror.
Mhm.
Nothing overtly on the page, but that sneaks up on you. And I
Mhm.
think that there's a lot of that in here. I mean, instructions
Yeah, that
is,
was an early one too. That was a goofy one. I didn't think Michael Kelly was going to let that one stay, but
I mean, I know a lot of people are reading the Daily Dracula thing right
are they?
now.
Yeah,
And, this is kind of similar. It's not letters, it's instructions for soldiers,
yeah.
going,
It's
but
helpful. It's trying to help.
yeah, sure. The fact that, the Germans aren't really Germans. Yeah, sure. And then, 16 minutes.
Oh, I just talked about that one yesterday morning. I met with Electric Sheep, which is a story discussion and writing group, and they had so many questions about that one. And I was like, I just thought it would be kind of entertaining to be like, you've in horror, the big thing about horror, quiet horror, gory horror, body horror, anything like that, is the idea that the characters are not safe, can't be safe because it's horror. That exposing us, the viewer or the reader, to this feeling of vulnerability and danger and desperation and insecurity is the point, right? So
Right.
here's this guy who, there's a nuclear incident. They didn't get very much warning. He abandons his family and rushes into the bunker. And now he's like, I'm safe. Of course he isn't. There's something else already in there. So his safety is an illusion, and that's what makes it a horror story. So, again, I'm talking about this yesterday, and everyone's like, "You rat!" I'm like, well, it's only one rat. That's not so bad. It's not like Dominion.
Yeah, no, but it's sort of, it's this, and there's only a few scenes, but it's snippets of someone going insane. And
Yeah, it's
that's the
like,
real horror.
how do you portray someone slowly losing their mind from guilt?
Yeah.
More or less, and how does that look, and how do I do that in a flash story? Because I did enter a lot of those Molotov lit scene contests back in the day, partly to force myself to practice writing really short form, because the shorter a short story is, or the shorter the length constraints are, the harder I find it to write. Like last year I was solicited for a story for a local magazine, Edify magazine, that was 500 words, and they gave me something like a 6-month lead time, and I was like, good, I'm going to need the whole 6 months.
every word counts.
Yeah, every
Yeah.
word counts, and my natural writing length is novel. So the shorter the story, and so when that one placed, I was like, yay, good job, horrible nuclear guy, good job, rat.
So can we talk about Fortunato?
Oh yeah, I loved that story. I'm so glad it escaped the anthology it was in.
Well, so
Sounds like a story.
tell us about that, because
Oh man. Yeah, I wrote that story specifically for that anthology call, and I think um that was another like Lovecraftian anthology, I think, and it was something like space-based horror. And usually when you write a story for a call, you don't expect it to get bought. So I was really pleased when that one did. But yeah, that was specifically, and I think I mentioned this in the author notes as well, but that was specifically me seeing if I could make explicit something that the Aliens movies just make implicit, which is that you can have cosmic horror in a sci-fi setting in the future, because there's nothing about cosmic horror that says it has to stay in the present or the past.
right.
There's no reason that I need to write or play in like Lovecraft's sandbox in the era, kind of.
Right.
So there's actually 2 stories in there that are sort of like sci-fi cosmic horror.
Right.
The other one being that Beowulf retelling. But yeah, I just wanted to be like, if you go on a rescue mission and you think you're just bringing back people and you're helping and you're a helpful group of people, that's nice, right? There can't be any horror there, right?
Mhm.
But you got to be careful what you bring back. It's yeah, I really liked that story. I wanted to write more in like that kind of Space Marines cosmic horror world, and kind of lean into the idea that the blend between cosmic horror and sci-fi should be kind of an uneasy one, because we're
Yeah.
talking about in the future we expect our knowledge base to expand. We expect people to be more scientific, more skeptical, to know more things, to be able to study more things, measure more things, to have kind of gotten very far away from the old superstitions and beliefs, and even probably faith and mythology and things like that. And so when they're presented with something they can't analyze and understand, there's an inherent tension there that I think works really, really well in fiction.
Yeah, our friend Jeff Thomas, his Punktown setting is Lovecraftian horror, but on another planet colonized by hundreds of different alien species,
Perfect. Yeah.
and they all have their own myths about the old ones, and all that is colliding on this melange of a planet.
Mhm.
Really well done. And then
Well,
is it
I just
Elizabeth-
want to butt in
Yeah.
real quick and say that Premee, if you have not gotten to those yet, I mean, all of our TBRs are so huge, right?
Yeah.
But it sounds like to me that you would really love Punktown.
Yeah,
the
somebody
series.
throw the reference in the chat or something. Yeah, or show
So
notes.
one thing about Punktown, the interesting thing that I found that like I don't think any other author has done is like these aliens, Cthulhu's family or whatever, trying to break into our dimension. They don't care where they physically do it. So these other intelligences have their own ancient grimoires and their own ancient legends that they're these monstrous creatures trying to go through. It's not just something that happens on Earth.
Mhm.
And we could be like all there with Professor Armitage chanting the right chants, but if over on the planet Mongo they say, "Hey, come on in, we're all doomed."
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
And then Elizabeth Bear writes a lot
Yeah.
of very
Yeah,
similar
yeah.
sci-fi horror
Yeah.
set with Lovecraftian monsters, and really fun stuff. And then you mentioned is it For Each of These Miseries,
Yeah, yeah.
which is sort of a rift on the temple.
Yeah. So that was the temple plus Beowulf. It
Yeah.
was definitely a case where oh wow, these undersea formations sure look like they were made by something instead of just accreting here naturally. Ha ha.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
So throughout the book, all right, so there's this I get called out by my beta reader, because my favorite word to use, and she's called me out on this, is detritus.
What's that word? It's not Cyclopean. It's not Batrachian. Come on. Like,
Yeah,
what kind of Lovecraftians are we?
exactly. But so it's like I'm reading a story, and it's like in the first paragraph there's the word detritus.
I'm
You know,
like, I'm owning it. And I
yeah,
don't have beta readers, so nobody can tell me to take it out.
right. But I use the word detritus because I'm an ecologist, and
Ah, yeah, nice. Yeah, my second degree was in environmental science. So
okay, so what do you do in the real world that because
yeah,
there's a whole bunch of us.
Yeah, there are a whole bunch of us. And yeah, I think this is a running gag. So my first degree was actually molecular genetics, and my second one was environmental science, focusing on land reclamation. But my professional designation is I'm a professional agrologist. I'm a PAG. So the running gag for me was, yeah, I got an environmental science degree to, let me know which parts of the environment to avoid. Turns out it's a lot of them. I every time I go outside, I'm like, let's just pave this all over. It's terrible. A bug will touch me. But like I definitely think the more you learn about the natural world, the more you just start collecting horrific facts about every single thing that you can no longer scrape out of your mind.
Yeah.
And I think that's something very useful for horror writers in particular. Even if it's not overtly, like even if the research or this awful trivia or anything like that is not overtly in the story, it's in there in the vibe.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Evaluator it's also, aside from being a possession story that was written for a possession call, it's also a contaminated site story.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's just there's some things that only environmentalists, people who've been in the
Yeah.
field, and can really relate to, and
Yeah.
it's coming through in your in the language. And
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I hope so.
um
What draws you to cosmic horror?
I don't know. I didn't start reading it really, aside from Robert E. Howard and some of the Poe stuff, until I was in like my, I don't know, 20s, something like that. I was emailing back and forth with a friend, and I was talking about a story idea, and he was like, "Well, that sounds very Lovecraftian. You should write that." I'm like, "That sounds what?" So yeah, I mean, for some reason, in 12 years of Catholic school, he wasn't on the curriculum, but
So strange. Yeah.
go figure. So I did start picking up, the short stories. I found one of those gigantic, fat, like The Collected H.P. Lovecraft that has a lot of his poetry and whatnot. And I like the world. I like the sandbox. Um, I started spinning off onto some of the other weird writers and got completely fixated on like Mackin. And also, I think there's a not zero amount of existential horror and cosmic horror in M.R. James stories as well, because I recently started getting into those, and they're old, but like they're scary as hell. Like you can't read those at night. It is completely unreasonable how scary some of those are. I think it was just I was drawn at first in reading it to another way of being scared. Um, like again, being a scientist, everything gives me some variety of an existential crisis. Like I have a friend who deliberately goes out of her way to send me facts about the James Webb Space Telescope so that I will have an existential crisis and then go hide under my desk for a day. Like anything
That's
about
so sweet. What a good friend.
I know. She's like, here's another article of like, I hate you. So, or deep sea facts, things like that, deep space, deep sea, anything where it seems really, really clear that the entire universe or the multiverse, if there's more than one, all of it is extremely inimical to human beings, and we should be more grateful and feel more stunned with wonder every day that we are actually alive at all. So I think the cosmic horror appeal for me in writing it was to see if I could, in any way, at any point, recapture that feeling. And I think there's definitely been hits and misses, but I'm glad that the stories that made it into this collection kind of express that particular sense of discomfort and uneasiness. And also, as discussed, the challenge of writing cosmic horror is that we shouldn't be able to be in conflict with the antagonist. Like there should be no way. They're gods or they're spirits or they're monsters or demons or whatever you want to call them. They're immensely powerful. They're ancient. They know everything. They've existed since the start of time, or they've come in from another dimension. We can't understand them. We shouldn't be able to negotiate with them or comprehend them or bargain with them or beg or plead or nag or bully or coerce. So how do you fight them? How do you defeat them? How do you live under them, or do you live under them? Like, how do you deal with the idea that these things are real, they exist, and that they can do whatever they want with you? I thought there were so many unanswered questions presented in cosmic horror, and that when you write cosmic horror, you have to keep pushing these questions to the forefront and kind of making the reader feel that discomfort that oh, I can't answer this. I don't know what to do.
There's
Yeah,
sorry, Pete.
No, go ahead.
There's I want to help your friend out. There's a
No.
video, and I just posted it in the side chat for not the audience side chat, but our side chat. But anyone go on YouTube and type in timeline of the universe.
Yeah, is that the one that's going to tell me that the James Webb is trying to look and see exactly when the universe starts and therefore attempt to see what happened in those first like femtoseconds right afterwards? I don't want to know. No, why are we looking? Why are we
No,
looking
it's
that far back?
it's
Nobody needs
it's
to look that far back.
Exactly, but we're a curious species, though. That's the problem.
And the
No,
other book I recommend is The End of the Universe, Astrophysically Speaking by Katie Mack. It's an incredibly good read. It's one of the best pop sci books I've ever read in my life. And yeah, it gave me an existential crisis like every 3-4 pages. I had to like keep stopping.
This video, you know, the universe has been here for almost 14 billion years.
Yeah.
And one of the first things it says is that the universe is just beginning. In other words, it's going to be around an incredibly long time. And first of all, 14 billion years is pretty hard for the human mind to really comprehend.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that really hit me watching this video was the fact that for most of the life of the universe, there will not be any life whatsoever in it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or probably not. So it'll definitely give you an existential crisis.
I'll add it to my list of existential crises.
Awesome.
Well, so I think if that's the kind of thing you're interested in is how do you approach fighting these impossible alien situations? Actually, Caitlin Kiernan has written some novellas recently.
Mm-hmm.
She calls it her tin foil dossier. One's called Black Helicopters, I think. But she's written like 3 novellas that have been published through Tor. One's called The Tindalos Asset. They're really about governments and people in this very kind of situation. And I think lately her interests have turned away from Lovecraftiana for the most part, but this is kind of like where she eventually came to with her writing.
Yeah, I tried to do kind of the same thing in the Void trilogy as well, which is, again, you don't have a story if you just have characters who are smashed flat instantly by the bad guy. So in all 3 books, the story is kind of, well, what specifically about humanity or humans lets us even make a stand against these things. And again, this is not really a spoiler for the books, but you know, if you can't beat them, maybe you can just shut the door against them and try to lock the door. So I think that's the best we ended up doing in those. But again, keep in mind, the first book was started when I was 18 years old, and I finished it when I was about 20. I finished it in undergrad. And I don't know if my thinking on it has evolved so much, but I think it's clear in the first book that what I was struggling with is how do you fight? Kind of.
I really like that book.
Oh, thank you.
And it's called Beneath the Rising, and it's a first book of a trilogy, right?
Yeah. It was supposed to be a duology, in case people are wondering about the ending of the second book.
Well, folks should definitely check out your collection, but obviously they should also read this trilogy. Beneath the Rising is the first book, as I said. Tell us a little bit, just real quickly, about the world beneath the rising, because something very interesting. This isn't really a spoiler because it happens in the first few pages, but 9/11 didn't happen in this world.
Yeah. So the first book was actually started before 9/11 happened in this universe. And it ended up being incorporated into the beginning in edits sometime in like 2001, later in 2001, kind of after I saw what was happening to, I mean, people of color, but specifically people who looked sort of like I look around that time, specifically a couple of weeks after 9/11. And this is Canada, keep in mind. So if anyone's out there thinking Canada is so much better than the States, we're really not. A buddy of mine was supposed to meet me for dinner one night after a seminar, and he didn't show up, and I caught up with him the next day, and he was Middle Eastern, and a bunch of guys caught him outside his dorm and beat him up. And were shouting various confusingly American patriotic things, even though we're Canadian or whatever. But
That's
there was a lot of
heartbreaking.
that kind of anti-brown people sentiment around then that I thought worked well for the start of the book. But then it is an alternate history. So again, when it was going out on sub, we had editors who were like, we love it, but we don't know where to shelve it because it's sci-fi and it's fantasy and it's horror. And for some reason it's alternate history. I'm like, well, just buy it. I feel like this is very much a you problem, not a me problem. But, yeah, it's actually important that without spoiling too much, it's actually important that they're living in a world that is very similar to ours, but not exactly like ours. In the second book, there's a couple more hints. You know, there's a different James Bond than Daniel Craig or Pierce Brosnan, whoever it was at that time in like 2004. U2 broke up, that kind of thing. So there's minimal clues, but that's leading towards the idea that it's possible that some of their specific problems, which frankly they've caused, that some of their specific problems may be solvable, but not in this universe, in another universe. And these are the clues that there's another universe, and possibly more than just two, and possibly more than 100. Possibly there's an infinite number of universes.
Pete, you have any more questions?
So a lot of the collection is anti-anthropocentric.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Sorry, humans.
4 Hours of a Revolution is completely the opposite. It's very anthropocentric.
I love that story.
And it's so, to me, okay, so I got a little bit of spoiler. It's about death waiting for its victim.
Yeah.
But there's lots of deaths.
Yeah.
And in the last seconds, this death, who has been our protagonist, our point of view, decides to break the rules and grab the wrong soul. And then it's like, oh, well, we'll just fix it in committee.
Yeah. There's it's okay. This is administrative. This is
right.
Just, yeah.
That's the horror.
It's corporate way of handling things.
Yeah.
That's the corporate horror of, this sort of, hierarchical angel theology that, that suddenly there's
the horror in that one was that it was supposed to be this dystopia, like that it was kind of the end of a world.
Right.
But yeah, Michael Kelly saw it the same way you did and was like, the horror comes at the end when you start to think about the implications of this world where there's kind of an individualized death for every single person, and that these kind of mix-ups and decision makings and no take backsies must happen all the time.
Right. And we just, and we'll just take it to the university committee, and we'll you'll get a
we'll
slap.
Take it to HR, it's fine.
We'll fix it. Like, what? No, but yes, but oh my God.
I love that story. I don't know if you guys haven't heard the narration that Pseudopod did for that. It's incredible. It's
nice.
This guy with a very, very deep voice, very English accent. He sounds like a very, very good deaf. And he does the whole story with this kind of gravitas and dignity, but also this very dry humor that I didn't perceive in the story myself. But he sounds like a very old, very jaded deaf. And he's like, I have seen everything. I don't think there's a reason to make an exception for this young revolutionary, but
oops,
maybe I will. Oops, because she's brave and I love her.
Because I haven't seen that before.
Yeah.
I'm interested. I want to see where this goes. It's very death, right?
Yeah. I really think more stories should have death as a narrator or protagonist. I mean, that was sort of a spinning off of all the Terry Pratchett stories where death is a very very main character. But this is definitely a different death.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's next? You mentioned the novella coming out.
Yeah. So that's going to be in 2024. I also have 2 sequels to my 2021 novella, The Annual Migration of Clouds, which won the Aurora Award last year. And those will be coming out. Oh, thank you. Those will be coming out later this year, or sorry, I think possibly either later this year or early 2024. The first one, and then the next one will be the year after that. And then there's also the Tor.com novella, which is The Butcher of the Forest. Very excited for that one. I just got to see a sample cover, so we'll be doing the cover reveal, I think June 1st. So you guys got to hear that first.
Awesome.
And I also have a military fantasy horror novel called The Siege of Burning Grass with Solaris that's coming out in 2024 or early 2024. So
Nice.
there's a bunch of that, and then there's a bunch of, like I mentioned, short stories and anthologies coming out. So What Draws Us Near, I'm in that one. Wilted Pages, I have a disgustingly gory dark academia story coming out in that one, and also Playlist of the Damned, which I don't know if you guys have seen the Kickstarter going up for that. The premise is that some hikers find a cassette tape in the woods with however many songs, and all the songs, you know, all the stories are based on a song on the cassette tape. So that's kind of looking forward to that.
That's a very
coming
cool
out.
idea.
Yeah, yeah. So like music-based horror. I'm writing my story based on a Nick Cave song. Because that guy knows horror.
As a woman of color in horror / sci-fi, etc., are there any experiences you want to share or any advice that you would want to give other women of color?
Yeah, I think I would give different advice now than I would have given a couple of years ago. But now it's don't cut yourself down or shrink yourself or your writing to fit a white Western audience. Not if that's not what you're comfortable with. I think the way forward in horror is going to be people leaning into embracing, understanding, and imitating in fiction their personal histories, their family histories, their ethnicities, their cultures, their backgrounds, the things that are important. Can I help you? Oh no, it's an eldritch horror. Get off. Oh, shoot. Is don't diminish yourself to imitate horror writers that are not you. Because what's great about horror is what we individually are bringing to it. I think I did a lot more of that when I was younger, and being very imitative and not trying to find my own voice and my own niche. But I think there's a lot to be said for bringing your whole self to your fiction and not being afraid of doing that.
Laird said something interesting last week when he was here, Laird Barron, that he was happy to see the change and more diversity. But I liked what he said when he said it's a beginning and not an end.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beginning point.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. God, I'm glad he's feeling better too.
He's getting there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It seemed very touch and go for a little while.
For sure. Tanya, you have a question too, don't you?
I do. So you talked about going to Catholic school. I grew up in a really conservative community in the Bible Belt. So I didn't go to Catholic school, but it basically was Baptist school.
Yeah.
Like literally we read the first 5 books of the Bible for AP English. I didn't read Lovecraft either until like I was well into adulthood. Like Poe was the only horror author that I was exposed to in school. And I'm just really curious how you feel like that has affected your writing, you know, sort of like a late introduction to these things that a lot of people had experience with from a younger age.
Yeah, that is a super good question. And I started thinking about that actually when my novel started coming out and people were going, yeah, what were your influences? Where did this come from? I think the big benefit of coming to cosmic horror specifically later on in life is being able to look at it with a more critical lens, not just the quality of the writing, but the other things that we evaluate when we look closely at fiction. You know, the characters and the settings and the arcs and the structure and the prose itself and the emotions that are trying to be conveyed in it, and the you know, kind of the shape and the formats and whatever narrative gimmickry or tricks are being used in it as well. So those were things that I would not have been able to perceive or appreciate or critique if I had come to Lovecraft when a lot of people I know now in writing did come to Lovecraft versus when they were like teenagers. A lot of the stuff that I read when I was younger just kind of sank into my brain like, you know, something into hot wax. So there are books that I read as a kid that I can probably still recite whole passages from now. And if I had gotten into cosmic horror at that age, I'm sure it would have done the same thing, but I'm also sure that my writing now would be quite different, and that I would have been looking, I think, less closely at some of the racism and bigotry and xenophobia that's in there. And I would have internalized a lot more of that kind of fear of the other and horror of the other, and trying explicitly to make people who looked like me the subject of the horror in, the stories. They're like, oh, this street was great until the fucking immigrants started moving in, and I'm like, oh, what immigrant? Oh, Polish people. Okay, well, I'm sorry about your Polish people, probably.
Right, or the Italians.
Or the Italians, yeah, or the Irish or whatever. It's something that I'm very, very glad that I came to as an adult. So I don't have any formal writing training. My degrees are all in science, but you read enough, then you start to be able to build up that kind of mental database of things to compare other things to, so that you can calibrate what you read. And again, fun fact, because I started Beneath the Rising when I was a kid, technically, I graduated high school at 16, so I started university very early. And the first, like the earliest drafts of that were strictly like Johnny and Nick were battling actually the devil and demons. And if there were going to be angels in there, then they would have been good spirits. And I kept getting bored of it. I was like, this is really stupid. This is reductive. And there's probably a million, humans versus the devil stories out there. What else is out there? So the timing of the friend that I was emailing me with saying that, oh, it sounds like you on your own are starting to write cosmic horror. Maybe you should, read some of the older stories about it, turned out to be really fortuitous.
That is
That's
really
an awesome
interesting.
answer.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
I
I
love
think it's
that.
really interesting that you started actually writing cosmic horror, and
Yeah.
then
And
you
he
came to
taught it.
Lovecraft. That was, yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah. He was like, it was kind of an emergent property of what you were doing. I'm like, oh, are you referring to my undergraduate science degree in which I am breathing in a huge amount of fumes every day? He's like, yes, that's the one. And also, maybe you should be breathing in fewer fumes. I was like, why? It's lab hours.
Did you tell your Catholic school that you were writing horror stories?
I did not. I have not told my Catholic
That
school
was
anything.
smart, because I
Yeah.
wrote stories at my conservative school and they were like, no, that's wrong. You're going to go to hell. Yeah.
All of my writing was kept completely on the down low, except from, one or two friends who knew that I did it as a hobby, basically until I started getting short stories published in like 2015 or 2016 or whatever it was.
That's the smart way to do it.
Yeah,
That's the smart way to do it.
yeah. And again, my mom is Hindu, my dad is Muslim, and my brother and I both went to Catholic school for 12 years, and then we both came out atheists, and they're like, what happened? What did you expect to happen? We're very confused.
I see the cracks inherent in the system.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invite.
Sure. The name of the collection again is No One Will Come Back for Us by Premee Mohamed. There it is.
Got a tentacle.
And it's so good. So good.
And this astronaut has a
Super
problem.
good.
Yeah, Pete doesn't tell people to run, not walk, to buy a book unless he really means it. So
thank you, Pete. I appreciate you.
And I agree with him. Yeah.
So it's going on the shelf. I have, Matt and I have some premier collections of Lovecraftiana, and this is going on the shelf. So
thank you. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. I'm very insecure about my short stories because I mostly write novels, and every short story is like pulling teeth. It's so hard. But
one of the things I'm doing in my head, and I've got a few notes for it, is sort of this timeline of Lovecraftian fiction, where like various writers come in and spin off.
Yeah.
Derelith spins off in the 40s and the 50s, and then after that, Brian Lumley spins off of Derelith, and there's Ramsey Campbell and Stephen King, and
there's a Brian Lumley reference in my third Void trilogy book. There's a reference to one of his stories.
Yeah,
hope people spot that.
But
so my mind, and I was like, how else can I use this?
I want to add this to that to that timeline of when, modern cosmic horror continues to grow based on all this stuff. And this is a fine addition to that process.
Oh, thank you.
I'm really
Yeah.
happy with it.
Super, super glad you enjoyed it.
Okay, now see, I would put my book on your shelf, but if you look behind Tanya to her left, there's a stack of books by the shelf. Now, my stack is not nearly that neat. It's much bigger and it's more like a heap, but it's going in that heap.
Oh, I've got a heap on the other side of my desk too. But to be fair, I'm judging for the Shirley Jackson Award, so all of that on the floor is stuff that I've either read or still need to read for
Yeah.
the Shirley Jackson Awards, as well as the stuff that's in front of me that you guys
Well,
cannot
now we all know what's
see.
being considered for the Shirley Jackson.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Zoom
Like,
in? Yeah.
zoom in, see what you can find out.
Yeah, I recently bought a very tall bookshelf and installed it in the basement. And I was like, good, that should take care of all the overflow.
You fool.
I
Yep.
was wrong. More books seem to have spontaneously generated so that now there was overflow again. And I was like, how? I haven't bought any books recently. Where did
Yeah.
they come from?
I got this bookshelf and I thought I was set before.
Yeah.
This was before I started, but there's
No,
like
we are
stacks
fools.
behind the stacks. Like the books
Yeah.
that you can see, there's another, it's a really deep bookshelf. There's stacks
Yeah.
behind it.
And this
as
is
well,
why
so-
I hate on certain publishers not producing ebooks, because my house is so full of stuff now
Yeah.
that I had to make a deal with my wife that like I would stop buying physical books. And literally, like my office here, I've got books down over here. I've got
Yeah.
these shelves over there. There's more piled on the floor here and here. And there may be people on this podcast whose books are not available in ebooks that I give them garbage about all the time.
I'm
you relic.
sorry. I don't
They
have much
spawn.
control.
You don't. So it's definitely
He's like,
you
you're
just
doing this
look
to
around.
me personally. Me.
Yeah.
He is. Mike told me. That's what Mike said specifically.
Yeah.
So this
So-
is really on Mike, Pete. You need to talk to Mike about it.
Yeah, sorry.
It's gotten so bad that I'm actually considering like abandoning some of my fandoms. And yeah, I know.
How
It's
dare! Like I love
Or-
that. Like, the look that
or-
Premee gave was like almost clutching of pearls.
Clutching
Yeah.
my pearls, clutching my.
So
Yeah,
like
label.
I have a complete run of like Rex Stout books. And they're all in Xerox boxes in the closet. And it's because I don't have any shelf space for them. And I'm like,
I have seen
It's-
a lot of friends put up those like floating shelves, the ones where the books just kind of hang out on your walls.
yeah.
Oh, I
But
love
I moved
those, yeah.
into a stupid, horrible house built in 1957 with stupid idiot plaster walls. And you cannot hang
Oh yeah.
anything on these walls.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah, and
definitely
those-
can't
Going
sink
through a
drywall
stud.
anchors. I hate
Those
it.
books are heavier than you think they are
Yeah.
when you start putting them on
Yeah.
shelves like that. I actually did that in my condo. I used to live in
Oh, yeah.
LA where I had a hanging shelf that I put up, and I put like 180 Batman trades that I would use to taunt Mike with. But it was so heavy that over time
such a
it started
jerk.
sinking the wall,
Yeah.
and I literally had to put
And Mike was
extra.
like, that is the weight of your hubris. That's what that is.
Yeah.
Thank you,
That's what
Premee. I
happens
knew
when
I
you
liked
pick on
you.
it.
Hey, let's not give Mike any ammunition here. That's not fair.
See, I'm
Uh,
really lucky because my boyfriend likes really like obscure books that don't come in like audiobook or electronic format. So they only come in print. So he's collecting all of these print books. His collection is in our living room because there's no room in my
So he
office.
can't
for
say
it.
anything about your books.
Oh, he's talking about like how we need to get a bookshelf so that he has room for his books and I have room for my, like, he encourages me. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
No,
yet,
it's a good
like
thing.
when it comes time to move, I'm gonna be like, curses. I should have gotten rid
Yeah,
of all of
but like
these
I moved last year and I told my movers, I was like, I have a lot of books. They're like, oh yeah, people say that all the time. I'm like, no, I'm not
Yeah.
joking. Bring 3 to 4 times as many book boxes as you think I will need. And then they get over here, they're like, you've got like 4,000 books. I'm like, I told you.
Yeah, it was the same thing
I
last
have a
time.
lot
of
They
guys.
were like, how many boxes do you have? I'm like, probably like 20 or 30 boxes. And they were like, you'll be
books
able
are
to find
heavy to
less
move,
than
too.
that.
I am paying
Yeah.
you money because
Right.
you guys are all very young and fit, and I am a middle-aged woman. Just go read some books. Stop whining.
Right.
You are not
Believe
a
me when I
middle-aged woman,
say.
young lady. You are
I am-
young.
I am 41. I consider myself middle-aged.
Well, you certainly don't look 41.
You can't do that because
Oh,
that's
thank
my
you.
age and I don't consider myself middle aged. So
Well, I don't know what
You
Nicholas
young
Jones
whippersnappers.
said.
Well, okay, let's think about. I was
Whippersnappers.
thinking about this the other day. Technically, if you live to be 70 or 75, mid 30s to upper 30s is technically middle age, right?
Yeah.
There's
Why are
a
you
depressing
depressing me,
thought.
Mike?
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you, Tom.
I know. I depressed myself
Trying
last night
to.
with this.
I'm
as well.
leaving.
Yeah.
Pete, it's time to build another wing on the house. Just tell
I
me
know.
Yeah.
what you're doing.
Well, I've got a backyard now, and I'm like, I could put like one of those sheds out there, and then that could be a book shed or like a
A she
library.
shed.
As long as you have
She-
a dehumidifier out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or something. I also have a detached garage, and I don't have a car, so I'm like,
Well, that's a great idea. You imagine how many
So-
books you could fit there.
When
yeah,
I
and
was
it's got
Wow.
power and everything. So
when I was selling books, I had a client who would put his books into those plastic bags that you then vacuum packed.
oh yeah.
He would suck the air out of them so that they were vacuum sealed, and then he would drop them in freezers, humidity controlled freezers. And I went to his garage once, and he had
Mhm.
12 freezers of books.
Jeez, but how do you read a book if you're in the mood to read a book?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Were these like special, like first edition
Yeah,
collectors?
yeah, he was,
Okay.
like-
I was gonna
Yeah.
say, like, that's a big
Yeah.
archive thing that like archivists
Okay.
do
Yeah.
with like really old books, especially if they're starting to like develop mold or something like that, or like
Wow.
mildew. They'll vacuum seal them and stick them in a freezer to essentially like preserve them if
So
they
the
can't
freezers are
afford like
plugged
one of
in
those
and they're
fancy.
freezing and everything. It's not just
Mhm.
that you're like sealing it. Okay.
No,
Yep.
they're
Wow.
cold.
Yeah, you mentioned Beowulf earlier. The actual manuscript that still exists, they do something like that, and you have to get like ultra special permission to handle it, and
Yeah,
and when they
special
bring it out,
gloves. Yeah.
yeah,
So this
it's like a
actually-
whole
Lights.
thing.
This is a horror story. Somebody gets trapped in one of those very, very low temperature freezers with one of these eldritch books. What do? Do
Well,
they
they
try
set
to
it on
save their
fire.
lives
Die.
by opening up the book? Do they try to make a deal with something that they can summon from it to save their lives? Because they know
No,
Well,
no,
I
he
don't know.
just
If
set
they're
it
in that
on
position, they're
fire.
probably a librarian. So
See,
a librarian
This is one of these
going to
things
be.
where you prove that given the same premise, 10 people will write 10 different stories, maybe 11.
That's true. Yeah. Well, thanks for being here. We're going to talk for a few more minutes. You're welcome to stay, or if you need to go, that's totally fine too. So
yeah,
whatever you want to do.
I've got stuff to do today, but thank you guys so much for the invite. This was super fun.
No problem. I when it's up on audio, I'll send you a link, and just so you know, in the show notes of YouTube and all the audio apps, I'll have a link to your new collection. No one will come back for us. So
Awesome. Thank
check
you so
that
much.
out,
And thanks
folks.
everyone.
Yeah, thank you for being
Bye,
here.
Nice
Premee.
meeting you.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your talk.
Thank you. Enjoy the
Thanks
rest
so
of your day.
Thanks.
So speaking of Lovecraft, I saw an article, interesting article that the other day. Here's the headline. It's on CBR.com. Doctor Who's creepiest episode capitalizes on H.P. Lovecraft's spine-chilling tropes. Anyone want to guess?
Sandman one.
I would agree with that, but that's not what they went with. It's one that I've talked about before, but it's been years that I thought was
It's the one where
Gospel
the knock at the door.
of the train, you mean?
No, the one where they're supposed to be alone in the universe. And
It was like some mysterious character was under the bed.
I don't
all
remember
right,
that.
anyway, which one is it?
Midnight.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah,
Is that the one you were thinking of?
yeah, where they're like they go to the end of the universe. There's not supposed to be anybody, but there's a knock. At
Oh,
the
no,
door.
no. That's not it. This is
Oh.
season 4, episode 10. A group of strangers, I'm reading from the article now. A group of strangers are crammed into a shuttle that takes them across the planet Midnight. The
Oh,
shuttle
yeah,
shields the passengers from its hazardous, ultraviolet infused surface where no living thing can survive. The safety of the cabin's walls is all that protects them. Considered one of Doctor Who's creepiest episodes, Midnight is a tale of cabin fever and nameless entities.
Yeah, it's a don't get out of the lifeboat story.
Yeah. On a deeper
Season
level,
4, episode 10.
season 4, episode 10. That's right. On a deeper
Yeah.
level, however, the episode utilizes themes of human nature under extreme conditions and undefinable monsters that defy science, all of which are typical ingredients of a Lovecraftian classic.
Is this when the monster possesses different human hosts?
He
Yes,
starts talking. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's the one.
The stewardess, I think it's.
Yep.
Yeah. I think I'm going to rewatch that this afternoon.
They start chucking people out the airlock.
If I remember correctly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good episode, and I've thought that before. It was nice to see the article because first time I saw it, I thought, wow, how cosmic horror. Yeah. So, um, yeah. Okay. So what should we talk about next? I don't want to talk about this for too long. Maybe just
Well,
3 to
I have
5
a
minutes.
nice segue into cosmic horror.
Yeah. Let's do
Would
that. Go
like to
ahead.
talk about that we were talking about earlier. So, my podcast, Afflicted, is the first season is Lovecraft Country meets True Blood. And if we raise enough money for season 2, that's going to be The Conjuring meets Lovecraft Country. So very cosmic horror, supernatural, folklorish type thing.
Right.
And, earlier we were kind of talking about what happened to my terrible fundraising campaign. And long story short, the first platform we had it on broke and stopped taking donations, and they refused to disperse the donations we had already collected. And we decided that we didn't have enough faith in them to stay with them for the rest of our campaign, because if they went down like the last week of our campaign, we'd be absolutely screwed. So we switched back over to Indiegogo and have our campaign up there. But yeah, it's kind of rough at the
That's
moment. So
frustrating because that was
so
not
frustrating.
your fault at all.
So frustrating. And I got an email that they actually went down again on Thursday and haven't gotten another email saying that they're back up. So we made the right choice in moving over, but it's kind of a disaster.
But you had some
And
pledges that didn't
yeah.
that you lost because of that. So
Yeah, $3,000. So several of the people came back and still, went over it. Like they canceled their pledge on the Seed and Spark campaign, donated on the Indiegogo campaign. So we recovered probably about half of what
yeah.
we lost there. But while they were down, just based on the traffic and our typical conversion rate and typical donation rate, we lost anywhere between $1.5 to $3,000 in pledges that people couldn't make.
So can I ask, I'm always curious about this process,
Yeah.
like understanding exactly how much work it is to do a crowdfunding campaign. How did you go about choosing your platform? Say, why didn't you use GoFundMe or Kickstarter?
Yeah. Okay. So there's several different crowdfunding platforms, obviously, that you can use. GoFundMe is typically more for like personal type stuff, not for commercial stuff. And I want to make money off of my podcast, so GoFundMe is kind of out of the question. Um, Kickstarter, I looked at it the very first time I set up a fundraiser, and I compared that to Indiegogo. And the very first fundraiser I did was for my podcast Nightlight, just raising the money for the first season before I had my Patreon set up and all of that. And at the time, Kickstarter was an all or nothing, and I didn't have a platform, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to hit the goal that I had. So really, Indiegogo was my only choice of being able to keep whatever I raised without having to hit a specific goal. And then after that, like I just liked Indiegogo in general, and I was familiar with the platform and how it worked. And so I stuck with Indiegogo for Afflicted Season 1 campaign. But Indiegogo charges a 5% fee, whereas Seed and Spark doesn't charge that 5% fee. So I was like, okay, great. I can keep more of the money that I raise and go over to Seed and Spark because I'd heard really good things about it. But I just had terrible luck, and they decided to, I'm making air quotes, revamp their site right before I launched my campaign. And apparently they had, like, I don't know, AI test it for them. And like, I have no idea, but like there was so much stuff that was broken. It wasn't even just the fact that it couldn't take donations. Like Google Analytics wasn't on there at all. So I had no way of knowing, for instance, like which tweets worked the best. How much traffic were we getting from Twitter versus Facebook versus direct traffic from people just typing in the URL. So like marketing in the dark like that is a bad thing when it comes to a crowdfunding campaign, because it creates more work for you because you don't know what's a waste of your time, and you can just say, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore, and I'm going to focus on this type of stuff. And so when it went down, I was just like, there's too many problems with this platform. I don't feel comfortable continuing with it, which sucks because that means that, I have to pay Indiegogo, but they definitely earn, their keep just by, doing the job that they're supposed to do. If I have to pay for, the platform in order to ensure that I can raise money, then, yeah, I'm obviously going to pay the platform.
when does it end? And would you send me the link, and I'll make sure I share that in the show notes too.
Yes. It ends on, I think, July 14th
Okay, so we
is when
got
the
plenty of
campaign
time.
ends. Yeah, we have plenty of time, and the address is afflictedaudio.com/support. But yeah, it's all about
Will you
cosmic
email me
horror
that
and
right
yeah,
after the show? Because I want to include it in the show notes, and I do those
yeah.
right away.
I'm
So-
just gonna start an email to you because I will forget if I don't. So.
All right, so yeah, support our newest co-panelist, our newest
Yeah.
panelist here, guys.
Yeah, if you
And I'll
like
have that
Eldritch
link in the
Horror.
show notes. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, of course. Ben, you wanted to talk about something.
Yeah. So first, Mike, how are you doing?
Honestly, not that great health-wise, and tomorrow it'll be, for other reasons that I'm about to mention, tomorrow it'll be 2 weeks since I've had the biopsy done on the mass next to my thyroid, or Matt would probably describe it the best. That's not necessarily bad news, but it does wear on you every day that goes by.
So let's make sure we please get into that before you end the podcast, because I want to make sure everyone's helping to the best of their ability.
I just did a GoFundMe for not just me, but my son has a new medication that's costing us some money, and unfortunately, we've got to put Charlie the cat down because he's got diabetes. And speaking of masses, my dog has a mass on her stomach, so it's like, when it rains, it pours, and the whole GoFundMe is medical, but half of it's for humans and half of it's for a dog and a cat. So I want to thank everyone who has donated to that in the last couple of days. I hate to ask, but it's just kind of hard when you're poor. So
yeah,
you learn humility. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So please make sure you put that stuff in the show notes as well, because I do think that's important. Like, if people want to continue to see the podcast, we all need to continue to support you and the work you're doing.
Thanks.
That's just something I want to throw in there real quick, because I think we forget it sometimes, that it's human beings making this stuff. And when you're dealing with like significant life challenges, that may be why you don't see certain people on the podcast for quite a while, because it can become overwhelming to deal with this stuff.
Yeah, because one of our panelists hasn't been here in a while because they're going through a personal situation. I'm not going to say any more than that, but you're absolutely right. Sometimes that happens. We've all got those things. And thank you for what you said.
So on a lighter note, a topic I wanted to bring up. So Emily Andress, she is or was the showrunner. I don't know that it's still going, of Winona Earp. This was kind of like a pseudo neo-Western fantasy show. It's based on a comic book where she hunted vampires. It's decent. It's kind of fun. It at least used to be on Netflix. I'm not sure where it is now. But one thing she did is she started a Twitter thread talking about Joss Whedon. Now, I'm going to read it here real quick, and just as a disclaimer, and Mike knows this, I'm not a huge Joss Whedon fan. I wasn't before all the garbage came out about him.
I'm right there with you. I wasn't before. We've talked about this. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do think if you don't use Joss Whedon when understanding this, if you're taking it as kind of like a holistic topic of conversation, like say we substitute in H.P. Lovecraft or Robert E. Howard, I think this is a really important conversation to have, especially today. So I'm going to read it's pretty short here. So this is Emily speaking. My controversial writing opinion tonight is Joss Whedon was literally, this is in all caps, a genius. His character work on Avengers was unparalleled. BTVS, which is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, inspired an entire generation of writers. That's true. It is still room relevant, and pretending monsters can't also produce beautiful art is dangerous and disingenuous. He did groundbreaking cultural work that moved us all, and pretending it was less than sublime or attributing it to someone else helps no one and protects nobody moving forward. You have to stare at the monsters in the face, even if they made you feel particularly human. I saw a thread on Gunn vs. Whedon tonight, but it also literally happened to be the first time I showed my sweet, sensitive son the first Avengers and watched his delight and laughter, and I was reminded I would kill to write dialogue like this. Maybe bad man, God tier craft. So again, I disagree with her opinions about maybe the quality of some of these things, But I think that's a really important point, because a lot of times what's happening today is maybe there's a writer with like a massively best-selling fantasy series or vampire hunting TV show, and they do something terrible or they say something stupid or evil. And then retroactively, all of a sudden, the things they wrote were never really that good.
Right. The Whedon example, you could use in others, of course, to your point. But yeah, I'm not a Whedon fan, but I'm a massive Buffy Angel fan. So yeah, and of course, I think it needs to be said, if we are going to use Joss Whedon as an example very quickly, he had so much help. He didn't write every episode, not anything close to it. So,
Sure, and I think that's true of, at least in television, that's true of every creator. But
right.
We also don't want to take away the show running aspect of it. He did guide that show, for better or worse.
Good point. Yes.
And that's why I say I want to kind of like not just use Joss Whedon as an example, but there's, you can use J.K. Rowling, you can use again Lovecraft, you can use Robert E. Howard.
There
are
some assholes out there that are producing brilliant work, whether they're racist or homophobic or whatnot, or maybe they're just plain a jerk. Maybe they're just mean to people. Whatever.
There's two things we want to kind of acknowledge in that. One, it's okay to still enjoy the things they produce. Like, that's not evil. Like, you're not a bad person because you still enjoy reading Harry Potter or the Call of Cthulhu. Right. I've seen this actually come up a lot, where people are like, "Oh my gosh, how could you read H.P. Lovecraft? You must be a racist too." No, it doesn't have to be that way. And also, like, her other point is that it's dangerous if you try to pretend like these bad people can't make good art, because what ends up happening is you get a situation where maybe someone is a really gifted writer and everyone talks about how evil and terrible they are and how terrible of a writer they are. And then someone reads it and finds out, actually, this book's awesome. Maybe the other stuff they're saying, they're lying about that too. And, I remember in Supernatural, one of my...
Oh, Ben froze. My evil plan worked.
No, I was super.
Well, thank heavens it stopped just as he got going.
Well, while he is frozen, there he is. He's
there
back.
we are.
Yeah, it's gonna.
Okay, what were you saying about
now.
Supernatural?
So
actually, it didn't. It just cut you off for a second.
Yeah, you were just frozen in your face.
You're talking about Supernatural, and then it froze.
Yeah, so there's a great episode of Supernatural where Hitler gets resurrected. Do you remember this one?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a comment he makes when he's like, "Look what I accomplished with Mein Kampf. Imagine what I could accomplish with Twitter." And because he's got a point, like he was a very gifted public speaker and writer. And he's also
Have you ever tried to read Mein Kampf? Let's.
Right, we're reading in translation, but again, it's not that I am going to enjoy it. It's that like people read this thing and were heavily influenced by it. So we need to recognize that evil people can be gifted and talented at things. And we also need to recognize that in like, hey, to warn people about this, like, hey, if you're reading these things, like, be very careful because they're very manipulative or they know how to do this. So just know what you're reading.
I saw articles a year or two back when all this broke, just to use the Whedon example. And some of the titles of the articles were, "Is it still okay to enjoy Buffy the Vampire Slayer?" And I'm like, what? Are you nuts? Of course it's okay. And I saw a very silly, I don't want to dwell on this for too long, but it's a really good point, Ben, and I'm glad you brought it up. I saw a really silly sitcom decades ago, but I always remember the end of it because this kid tells their dad they don't want to go to this concert because they found out that members of the band were jerks for whatever reason. It doesn't matter. And at the end of it, the dad gets this point that you're trying to make across to him, and he goes, "Hey, why don't we go see this band? Do you like them?" And the kid goes, "No." He goes, "But they're really, really nice people." And the kid gets the point, So
there's a documentary that Stephen Fry did called Wagner and Me. Right, so Stephen Fry grew up this big fan of Richard Wagner,
Right.
who was a horrible anti-Semite and homophobic person from the 1800s. He was a composer. And he kind of addresses like the associations of that in the Nazis, and how can he be a fan of it if he's both Jewish and gay, and how you can kind of reconcile these things. I recommend checking it out. It's free on a service called Canopy, and it's also at least you used to be able to find it on Amazon Prime. But I think this is something we need to not forget. Like, if Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Angel inspired you in some way to be a writer, that's awesome. And you need to celebrate that. And you don't need to throw them away because Joss Whedon was and is a terrible person.
Yeah.
We don't need to throw out, like, if we had to do this, then every literature written before, I don't know, 2010, we're going to have to toss out because
Nah,
of
you gotta go
outdated
further back than
viewpoints.
that.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah, like-
Rick.
standards change. Because I'm reading a lot of hardboiled detective fiction. And they were homophobic. Maltese Falcon, an excellent example, if you read beneath the surface.
I
Yeah,
think
that's
too,
from
there's
that.
oh, I'm sorry, Rick, go ahead.
Other things, sometimes people change and society changes.
Yeah.
We now accept same-sex preference. But back then, if you saw a gay character in a mainstream novel, you would more than likely look.
Yeah. Even today, try being an atheist and president of the United States. It's not going to work. Or a lot of
Yeah.
elected offices.
Well, a
You know.
Catholic and a president of the United States.
Yeah, that was
Uh,
a big deal.
That was a big deal
Yeah.
when Kennedy was elected. Yeah. And not
And
as
still with
much now.
Biden.
Yeah. But
Not as bad
there's
as it
no
was
way
with
you can be an
Kennedy.
atheist and be elected
Yeah. But I
to
think
a lot of public offices. Now that may change, but right now, even in 2023,
it's still a big deal.
it's still a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tanya, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I think part of the distinction for me, anyway, is are people still profiting from the work that they've done? And are other people making their living off of the work that that problematic person done? So in the case of like Buffy and the Vampires, or Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, Joss Whedon's work, Dollhouse, any of that kind of stuff, like there are so many people that are making money from that work. So if we boycott his work, we're essentially also boycotting that work from all of these other people. We're harming
We're
these
punishing
people that
them
he
because of
abused
him.
on set. And like that's where the distinction is for me. It's like he abused women on set, and for us to say no, we're not going to watch Buffy or we're not going to watch Angel because Joss Whedon did it, means that we're also punishing the victim in that case. And that's why I can't get behind this idea that we can't consume Whedon's work, for instance.
Wonderful point.
J.K. Rowling, of course, like there's the books. And like me personally, like I'm totally okay with being like, I'm not buying any of those books. I mean, I've already read them anyway, but I wouldn't buy them again. But then like when it comes to like a game or something, there are people that are making money from that, and boycotting that hurts them as well. And not everyone can choose what kind of work they do, because some people just have to pay bills and they may not want to work for like a transphobe or a racist, or like I've worked for racist people before. I've worked for transphobic people before. I didn't want to, but if I didn't, I couldn't eat and I couldn't pay my bills. So it was a step, to get out of that situation.
Yeah.
So I think that we just have to be, I don't think that there is any ethical consumption in a capitalist society. Like there is nowhere that we can spend our money and know 100% that that person is not going to use the money that we've given them, the profit that we've given them, and use it to do something that is against our values or to do something that we consider to be evil. And
Except you could give the money to me and I could be sure.
No, you're evil.
So
So
if you send the money to me, I will be sure that I won't spend it in an offensive way. So just,
yeah,
just so all you listeners out there know.
Right.
So
what was the
otherwise
name
your
of
point stands.
What was the name of the book you edited, Matt?
Oh gosh. Pickman's Gallery was one.
Yeah, and there was another. My point is, it's okay Carpenter is evil, but those are good books. So
Plus, I didn't get money for them.
So
that's true too.
I got
anybody-
paid 2 copies of the book.
did
I guess the
anybody
bottom line
watch?
for me? Oh, sorry.
Let me, because I'm going to riff off of something that you said.
Okay.
There's a show called The Good Place.
Oh, I love that show.
And in the 3rd season, they actually get to analyze the data about who's going to heaven and who's going to hell.
Mhm.
And they find out that nobody is
Yeah,
going to
everybody's
heaven
going to hell because it's impossible.
to be a good
Because
person.
there's no ethical consumption in a
Yeah,
capitalist
that's
society.
what you said. That's what
Yeah.
reminded me. There's no ethical
Yes.
consumption possible anymore. Everything is linked, and somebody is doing something horrible,
Mhm.
and therefore you're doing something horrible and supporting them.
Right. Best you
The-
can do is just try not to give people money if you know that they are terrible humans and the money is only going to them and not going to anything else, like, paying people's bills and feeding their children and, things like that. I think that we also, like, especially with Whedon, we have to take into account that boycotting him boycotts his victims too.
That's an
And like,
important
I'm
distinction.
100% not okay with punishing his victims for what he did. I think that we can say, like, obviously, like, I'm not in a position to be like, okay, I'm not going to hire Josh Whedon on, this show that I want to do. Like, I have no say in that, right? But, we can, I think, collectively say that we will not support new work from Joss Whedon, that somebody else needs to be leading this so that these studios know that we do still vote with our dollars, or eyeballs, ears, whatever it is, in that sense, and let them know that we don't condone that behavior, or else, we're going to keep getting more Weinsteins and Whedons, and they're going to continue to, stay at the top while the people who are actually decent are, fighting to climb.
And I think that's very true. Like, if a new show is coming out from Joss Whedon, like whatever the one on HBO Max that failed was, you can just choose not to watch it. I just also want to be careful that we're not punishing those that maybe did consume the media before knowing any of this, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh well, now you're a bad person too because you did enjoy Harry Potter or the Vampire Slayer or any of the half the stuff we talked about today. You can separate these two things. That doesn't mean it's wrong for you to boycott somebody or choose not to read something. It's absolutely okay if you are a person of color to not want to read Robert E. Howard. I completely understand. It's also, we just want to be careful. Like, hey, just because you enjoy Conan the Barbarian, that doesn't make you as bad as Robert E. Howard himself.
Right. Well, thanks for bringing this up, Ben, Tanya, Ben, Rick, and everybody. Thanks for the points that you made. I appreciate it. You need to go, Matt?
No.
Okay.
I didn't know. I thought we were coming to an end.
We're getting there.
But I
There's
want to, I kind of want to expand on some things there because like we
dear
live in
God.
a society where we're able to pick and choose. What?
I'm just giving you shit.
Okay, but no, it's okay. So let's be real here. Thomas Jefferson, all men are created equal, was a great idea.
Mhm.
Yeah, unless
It's a
you're
great
not
idea.
all
It's a great
men.
idea, and that is a great standard, right? His personal execution, not so fucking good.
Yeah.
But we don't
Oh
throw
well,
away
yeah.
the idea.
All he should. Yeah, it should have been in his mind. It was all white men are created equal.
All rich white men.
Ah,
Yeah,
good
you had to be a
point.
landowner.
Christian
point.
white men.
Landowner. Protestant
That's right.
specifically.
Yes,
Protestant. Catholics
Protestant,
couldn't be
yes.
citizens, yeah.
Right.
If you're in our
Um,
club, then you're equal. Yeah.
All right.
That's not as catchy of a phrase.
Yeah,
So we gotta
exactly.
cut out all of those adjectives.
But look, what's his name? Newton, Isaac Newton writes gravity, right? Creates, just writes all the rules for gravity. The next thing he does is like phrenology.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
but let's be careful about Newton because he clearly suffered from mercury poisoning. And later in his life, he went off
Did
his
he?
nut from mercury poisoning.
Right.
So let's say him describing the diffraction of light and gravity came before he was a mercury head.
Okay.
But what about his invention of the cat door? Right? Because this is a very important invention in my life that he invented. When
I'm
did
still
that come to
pissed.
the mercury poisoning?
I'm still pissed that he created gravity.
Yeah,
You know?
Yeah, it really is a bummer. I'd be flying now if it weren't. Thanks, Pete.
yeah.
Fucking
Agatha
asshole.
Christie, horrible person, great writer. Edgar Allan Poe, anti-abolitionist, but the creator of modern mysteries and in probably one of the foundations of horror.
Yep.
All these people, they did wonderful things, that they did horrible things. We don't put them up on a pedestal.
Hemingway was an absolute jerk, terrible
Yeah.
father.
There are
The
also-
list goes on and on.
I mean, I think that we can learn something from these people. Like we can learn things about the craft, and like Victor Laval, for instance. I can't remember what Red Hook. It was, I think, he wrote.
Ballad of Black Tom.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Like someone black taking Lovecraft's work, like to me, and taking it and making it like a bestseller, like that's what you do with these people, even if they're dead. Like if Lovecraft knew that a black dude wrote some work based off of his work and made a lot of money off of it, he would lose his shit. And that gives me so much joy. And with that, I will be quiet and let Rick speak.
So wait, so you got to get in line, Tanya, because Ben and I get the Laval fanboy credentials here way before you.
Yeah, I want to wrap this up, but Rick wanted to say something.
We have people who are literally Jekylls and Hydes.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how much growing up as a kid I admired Bill Cosby. And then we had the scandal. Am I going to forget all these great comedies he did? His records, I think it goes back to his records as a comedian that I enjoyed, because now we had this horrible sexual predator history revealed.
Yeah.
That was very difficult.
I imagine. And that's another great point. Here's something you'll like, Rick. I don't know if you know about this. F. Paul Wilson, who's also had some health issues, in a major way recently. He's got on Kindle for $2.99. He's got an essay about Repairman Jack. Do you know about this?
No, why?
Yeah. In this essay, Wilson lets his readers in on how his beloved hero came to be. Wilson begins his personal story after he scored a hit with the Keep, when he found his inspiration for the next book in a dream. He discusses selecting and researching a monster, as well as developing Jack's supporting cast, and settling on a villain. He also shares how the first title in the series came to be. It wasn't always The Tomb. Wilson closes with Jack's fictional backstory and his thoughts on Jack's potential future, if there is one. So this is $2.99 on Kindle, and I'll try and remember to include the link in the show notes, but it's on Amazon. It's called Repairman Jack Mysterious Profiles. So I thought you especially would be interested in this, Rick, and I know a lot of listeners would be. So there's that. So I asked about what's the strangest thing that's happened to you, to the listeners. Put that in the YouTube comments. Here's a couple of recent things. This one right out of Ghost Story, sort of. On NPR, police come to pull a Jeep out of a lake. They find a woman inside alive. This happened last month. So it started with a call from a fisherman who said that he saw what looked to be a black Jeep virtually submerged in a large lake in Marion County, Texas. Not until later, after a tow truck came, did anyone realize that someone was in the vehicle and that they were still alive. Wow. So
I remember hearing about this.
Yeah.
She was in there for like what, 2 or 3 days, right? Like
I don't know how long it was.
Yeah, it was a while. Like people thought like, how is she still alive or something like that. I'm trying to figure out exactly where in Texas. Oh, like it's far east Texas,
Marion
like
County.
close to where I grew up. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a little southeast of where I grew up. For those who don't know, it's probably about, I don't know, 50 or 60 miles northwest of Shreveport, Louisiana, on the Texas side.
But here's the winner in my little Stranger Than Science
Oh,
segment
yes.
today. Do you like that book? I love this book.
I like anything that is stranger than science. Like I
Well,
didn't know that book existed, but I'm going
I
to
found it when I
find
was a
now.
kid. It was written in the 50s. And
Oh, shit.
obviously a lot of the stories in here are really not that true, but it's the idea that I love. So here's the winner for today, and then we'll move on, and we're going to wrap up in a minute. But the article title, this is AP News. None of this is onion stuff, okay? Colorado man tries to trade places with his dog to avoid DUI arrest.
Yeah, I saw that.
Colorado, like was
Right.
Colorado
That's
like
like that-
previously the Florida of the country? Like, did Florida
Well,
take its
that's-
place?
It's like that Far Side cartoon
Yeah.
where the guy says, "Yeah, I let my dog drive, but he's on the leash the whole time."
Yeah, I'm not crazy. I let him drive some. In fact, I posted that first today, but I never let him off of this leash for even a second.
I was a very responsible owner.
There's some movie where the cops pull over a whole car full of guys and they're like, "You're driving, yeah, and you're blind, yeah." It's like, why? Because I'm the only one who's sober.
Well, needless to say, the police officer was not fooled. So
No, yeah, no.
So there you go. It did not work. Anyone who wants to try this, it did not work.
People are stupid.
All right, everybody's still reading Dracula Daily. Still,
Yeah, there are no new entries now till May 28th.
Yeah. So,
So
if you're
it's
not
your
caught
chance
up,
to catch up.
yeah, the last entry was May 19th, I think, in Dracula. So I've got the link in the show notes, but just Google Dracula Daily. And it started on May the 3rd. So even if you didn't start on May the 3rd with the rest of us, you've got time to catch up. So any comments about the story thus far, Rick?
Are all the entries in the book in straight chronological order? They never go back.
I think that's correct. Yeah. They don't go back.
They don't go back, but I feel like there are sections where they discuss past things, like especially when it transitions from Harker to Mina, like where they're doing the articles about the ship and all of that stuff.
Right.
Gosh, I never actually thought about that. I don't know.
And Tal, who's one of the folks who started this, was going to be on today, but they'll be on 2 weeks from now to talk about this a bit. So that'll be cool. Anyway, so where we're at right now is Harker is now really realized the gravity of his situation. He just had his experience a couple days ago with the three sisters, or the three lady vampire sisters. And now he's trying to figure out what he's going to do. The lad is in trouble. I will tell you that.
A couple things have happened. He, for example, is looking out the window and he saw the Count crawling down the castle,
right,
face first, like an animal. He saw the Count give a bag to the three women who were his wives or brides, as we think of them now, and the bag was squirming and making noises like a child. So if you're a reader in the late 1800s, this kind of stuff is unnerving to me. And I've been through, like I've watched 80s horror movies, so this is pretty horrific stuff.
What I love about that passage is when you're dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, that is how you would process it. You wouldn't go, "Oh my God, there's a baby in that bag." You're trying every conceivable way in your subconscious for it to not be a baby in the bag.
For Ben to say this, Ben's given talks on PTSD. He's an expert on it.
I don't know if I'd use expert. I'm certainly a survivor of it with a lot of experience with it. And I think it's important to think about that. Like it's funny because in modern, I don't know, sometime in the 70s or 80s, they became popular to kind of make Dracula this romantic figure.
Right.
I think of like the Frank Langella Dracula and all that stuff. And it's like, oh, it's tragic. And Coppola did this in his film, made Dracula very tragic. Dracula is feeding a baby to vampires. Like
guy's a jerk. I'll tell
like
you.
He's a whole ass villain.
Here's the last sentence of that passage with the three sisters and the baby. Then the horror overcame me and I sank down unconscious. It was so bad for Harker that he passes out.
He's like a Lovecraft hero.
I don't know. I might pass out too if I was trapped in that castle and
He should have
someone's
played
feeding a
Tetris
baby.
afterwards.
Yeah.
Fun fact, playing Tetris after a traumatic event helps prevent, in some way, PTSD.
He should have done that. Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
I mean, if
absolutely right.
Tetris, existed
Anybody
back
seen
then.
Louis Godin version?
The which
Which version?
One starring Louis Godin.
I don't think so.
Is that the one
Louis
from
Jordan.
like at 96 or
BBC?
so?
That's the
I
one
think
with
I-
Frank Finlay is Van Helsing.
No.
Yes, I have this. I have this on DVD. It was filmed for the BBC. It's
Right, a BBC
considered
TV
the-
show, right?
Yeah, it's considered the most accurate version. It's from 1977. It's like 3 hours long.
What is the title of this?
It's just
Yes,
Count
I
Dracula.
also know. Count Dracula.
Yeah, it's Louis Jordan is plays Count Dracula. Frank Finlay is Van Helsing, as Rick said. I didn't recognize any of the other actors, but it's one of the only real change it makes is it smooshes together Quincy and Arthur Holmwood. But otherwise, it's considered the most like faithful adaptation of the novel to film.
And when
Well,
it
there
does,
are no-
they don't pull anything back.
And there are no armadillos roaming around in Dracula's castle.
Not
Armadillos.
Like, see, they're in the Bela Lugosi version.
Yeah.
Oh,
There's So this is like you watch this now. It's like there's armadillos in Bela Lugosi's Dracula castle, and it's like no.
now
Yeah.
there's
Well,
cosmic.
you think what you could do though, Pete.
Yeah.
You could write the other half of the novel that took place in Amarillo
by morning.
because there
Oh,
was a
from
portal of
San
some
Antonio.
sort.
Amarillo, Texas, and
Yeah,
vampire.
and it was Vlad's saloon.
I'll be
Now-
you know what? I'll be looking for 8 when they pull that gate, man. Anyway,
Oh, I gotta tell you guys, last night I was at a party for a birthday party for somebody, and we were sitting with people that didn't know me, and they found out that I was a writer. And the guy, all he did was pitch me story ideas all
I
night.
was about to say, give you some ideas, did he?
No, that's just like,
He wanted to give you some ideas. Yeah.
yeah. I just kept shaking my head. No.
No, go away. Go. So we've talked about, let's wrap this up with the worst evil that there is. We were just talking about Dracula, talking about cosmic horror with Premee Mohamed. We're talking about people like Joss Whedon and Matthew Carpenter, who's, I'm kidding. I'm not lumping you in with Joss Whedon.
Please don't do that.
When that came out, I was like, that doesn't sound good. Matt's a
Okay.
good
know,
guy.
Hey,
Matt's a very good
No,
guy.
it
But
sounded
see-
really, really good. Just don't
but
do
see,
that.
If
This
I
is very
had his
smooth. I was like,
money,
wait, is
I
there a
just don't know
different
how
one?
I'd be. Maybe if I had Whedon's money, I would be evil.
You'd still be a good guy. But the ultimate evil, as we all know, and Bentley Little has a new book out. And the title is DMV. I kid you not. So
I'm gonna admit I've read like 3 of his books. One of them was based on Walmart. It was something. It's
yeah,
Well,
it's
yeah.
kind of I like some of his books. They're kind of hit and miss for me personally, but he's pretty popular.
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
a very the fact he was able to take the concept of Walmart and turned it into a reasonably decent horror story. I'd give it like a 6.5 out of 10. That is impressive in my opinion. Like some of the things that happened in the book, but it's
Readers will think twice about renewing their licenses after reading DMV. I don't know about that.
But see, actually, the best depiction of DMV in the media has been in Zootopia. We all know that.
I don't know what that is.
Zootopia is one of my
Back.
Oh,
favorite
Zootopia.
zombie
Yeah,
movies.
the sloth is at the, he's like,
Everyone in
"Welcome to
DMV is a sloth."
DMV." That was so great.
So, well, we've just lost all of our DMV employee listeners. So let's
Well, what the hell
try
were
to
they doing
stop
watching
there.
the show during work anyway?
That's why the line is so long.
Duh.
All right, Matt, what's the prize again?
Okay, so first of all, for you all, in the side chat, I put a link about which is the best depiction of if Thomas Jefferson had been brought back forward into the future. Okay, this is the prize today. It's a graphic novel called Real Hero Shit. Nice art. You can send an email to easyandprizes@gmail.com, put RHS in the subject heading. We'll draw a winner in about 6 weeks. If you want to win, you got to enter.
Can't win if you don't play. Made that up just now.
Yes, yes, you can. Sometimes the best move is not to play.
That's true. Good movie. All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here. To all my panelists. Thanks to everyone who watches and listens, and thanks for everyone who gave to my GoFundMe. It's still up there. Thank you for the help. And got a lot of extra. There's a lot of extra swag if you become a Patreon. It starts at $5 a month, so it's very, very affordable. Just Google Lovecraft Easy and Patreon. So next week we will have Nathan Ballingrud, and he's going to be talking about his brand new book, The Strange. So I'm looking forward to that. And who's after that? Let's see. And then a couple weeks after that is Brian Evanson. A couple weeks after that is Paul Tremblay. So we've got some great guests coming up. And anyway, and thanks guys for being here. Thanks for watching and listening, and we'll see everybody next week.